make sure that it's actually really
Talk like a pirate day? Arr.
That's what I thought when I saw that.
Talk like a pirate day if you do it properly.
What's up, everyone? This is Jason Tucker, and this is episode number 316. This particular episode is brought to you by ServerPress, makers of desktop server. Feel free to go take a look at their website over at serverpress.com. Ta-da. Let's go around the room real quick. Get everyone introduced. What the heck? John Brown. Hey, how's it going, John Brown?
Hey, how's it going? I'm back on
Tell us
this.
about yourself.
I am John Brown. I'm back in California for a little bit. I'm a full-time nomad who runs a WordPress-focused agency called 9 Seeds. We build and sell WordPress themes, custom sites, plugins, all that stuff. That's it.
Bridget Willard. Oh my gosh. It's not even Thursday. It's Friday.
I know. I just wanted to shake it up. Bridget Willard. I specialize in doing marketing and social media consulting for WordPress products and services. You can find out more at bridgetwillard.com.
Ooh.
Awesome. Say, Reed, how about you?
Arr, mateys. My name is Say Reed, and I make WordPress, teach WordPress, preach WordPress at Say Reed Media on all the things.
Wow.
Musical today, Say. Lovely.
Oh, yeah. Dun, 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 dun. Wait, that's the wrong thing. Never
How
mind.
about you, Steve?
Oh, I am Steve Zingett. I'm the founder of Zeek Interactive. I run the OC WordPress meetup.
Awesome. Good to have you on. How about you, Jonathan?
Hey, Jonathan Wold. Based in North Idaho. I'm not exactly sure what I'm doing, but I'm having a lot of fun doing it. So it's good to be here.
Hey, man, as long as you get the bills paid, it doesn't matter what you do, right? I'm Jason Tucker. You can find me over at Jason Tucker on Twitter. My website is jasontucker.blog. I totally need to qualify that. My apologies.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, it's as long as you're working and doing stuff, it's cool.
I mean, it might be less drama for me to sell Coke instead of WordPress products. So I'm sure you guys all want to talk about
Like Coke and Pepsi, right?
cocaine.
You went straight there.
Right?
Wow.
So,
Me controversial.
Jason, I'm sure you want to talk about Carol Olinger being
Because
the
I don't think that WordPress this week needs more Coke. It needs a little bit of heroin. Like, choose a little, smoke a little pot. Whatever. WordPress needs to
right?
chill out.
stop, drop, and roll. Everybody
Today,
needs to just,
yeah.
like,
This week has been a very trying week in WordPress. There's a ton of stuff that's been going on in it. And you know, during the pre-show, I was thinking, I was like, you know, we're not one of those timely podcasts. We're not like, oh, let's talk about the news. Let's talk about all the things that were going on. But when you have so much news, you kind of have to, or you just kind of look like
It would be a dereliction of duty if we did not discuss what was going down in the community this week.
yeah, you definitely don't want to be an echo
I'm out of the
chamber.
loop. I'm out of the loop, so fill me in.
We would need 4 hours to cover all of it. Though. Like, let's
Yeah.
be honest.
Let's give a briefer for those of us, not me, who have been offline.
Me.
Bridget, you want to be a reporter?
Sure. So this week we had some issues with Make WordPress and WordPress organization, the community. Carol Olinger wrote a blog post that was pretty honest, and I've had that conversation with her in person, and I've experienced much of what she said. She is no longer going to be with Plesk for health reasons, but also discussed why she's no longer going to be working with WordCamp Europe. She's one of many women who are in the recent exodus from Make WordPress. Also, Jetpack.
Those one.
You know, I don't know what changed today,
One
but
at a time.
Jetpack allows search to feature their plugins and their features if you have that installed, which is unfair at the very least. Probably a conflict of interest. Some people are pretty upset about that. And number 3, PipDig, a theme developer, allowed Killswitch and some DDoS attacks.
All right.
DDoS.
And that's just this week. That doesn't count all the stuff last week, like the week before with
Where do we want to
social warfare.
So I do want to say,
talk about that one already? Where do we want to start?
I do want to say that Jetpack released a mea culpa, as it were, to adjust. I haven't looked at the new dashboard results screen, but according to their most recent blog post and their most recent update, they have heard the community and have modified those results to only, instead of showing things that Jetpack, that you would have to upgrade to your version of Jetpack for in order to get. It will only show those things if that is something that is included in the level of Jetpack that you have. So it's less of an advertisement, more of a surfacing. And they have modified the design so that it does not look like a typical search result in the plugins repository. So
which makes it look more like an ad.
Right. Well, I mean, ads in the dashboard is like a whole other thing that like Jason's been on a thing about for like a while, and rightfully so. But I do want to just say, I think it's really important to acknowledge that, one, this stuff can move really quickly, and we do have to acknowledge when, in the rare instances in which feedback from the community does result in a change of some sort, because I think those need to be applauded. Otherwise, they're not even going to happen. So even the small steps should be like, okay, that's a step. You know,
any other plugin would never be allowed to do this, but when Automatic does something and then it's like, oops, I'm really sorry, and then scales back a little bit, then we have to applaud that.
Well, the thing is,
that's
right?
That's really fair, though. So let me respond to what Bridget said. The Jetpack got allowed to do this because I think that there's a couple of important pieces of context here, and it's fair to say. So let me back up. So Jetpack actually approached the plugin review team and said, hey, can we do this? Does this violate guidelines? Can we do it? And the plugin review team that approves all the plugins that go into the repo said, yes, it's okay, do this. And I actually understand, while I completely object to it happening, I understand some of the intent behind it, which was, it is helpful to users to know a plugin you already have installed does what you're searching for.
Yes,
the implementation, however, which is what Jetpack just rolled back, which I think is commendable to Jetpack, was that it looked like Jetpack was the first search result because it looked like a search result card when you search for it, for whatever you search for. And with a plugin like Jetpack in particular, like that bundles 50 features, like they end up being the first looking result for 50 features. And I think that is a disservice to all the other plugins and a disservice to the search engine that's saying we're going to surface results in a manner that we think is egalitarian towards all plugins. There's been a lengthy discussion. So probably the best part of the discussion was that Joost de Valk opened up a track ticket and proposed some alternatives, trying to take a step forward and saying, let's build this into core in a better way. And that is several mockups which show already installed plugins showing above and outside of the search results.
Right.
And I think that's a better scenario than what Jetpack did, which was what looks like the first search results card. But on the other hand, I still object to surfacing these at the top of the search results when they're not really necessarily relevant. Like the use cases that come up with are, but it doesn't scale to the entire plugin ecosystem well.
If it ends up being that people, for example, mark their plugin to come up for a certain search term, that's going to end up being like the theme repo where it's like you click, left sidebar or whatever the hell, and like everything in there comes up and it's a completely useless marker. And if you don't do that, for example, if those results, those surfacing results, as opposed to like search results, are being done by, for example, the plugins team, that's putting a huge burden onto them to do that. So the question then is, how are those surfaced results going to be different? Like, how are those going to be decided upon? Is that just a new search algorithm kind of deal where it's like searching your own stuff, and who decides what ranks for that? So it does open up even more problems. The thing is, we should have been having this discussion prior probably to that being launched, but the thing is true. It's like, there's that old adage, like, better to ask for forgiveness than permission, which is obviously
what's wrong with WordPress.
Obviously at play here. So there was publishing and ask for forgiveness later is kind of our main models that we're going on.
There was a discussion relative to this when the plugin review guidelines got revised about, I'm bad with timelines, a year or two ago.
I think it was September.
And Mika spearheaded that, and there was a lot of feedback, and a lot of people wanted stricter guidelines that said no to advertising. And it was loosened up with the idea that the plugin review team, Mika and Sam, would be the arbiters of that. And for me, it's really not like, I immediately said, I hate what Jetpack's doing. But then on the same token, Jetpack asked permission to do this and got it.
Okay.
Like the review team and the guidelines should have prevented that, and they didn't.
Okay.
And yeah, you can say like Jetpack shouldn't have even asked in the first place. But I think that there was intent there to make a better user experience of making sure people are aware that plugins they already have installed do a certain thing. I get the intent there. I don't like the implementation. I think Joost de Valk's implementation is better. I think that my suggestion on that same track ticket, 46763, is even better, where you just highlight the card in the place it shows up in the search results. If the search result is for XML sitemaps and your plugin shows up third, it should still show up third. It shouldn't pop to the top just because it's already installed, but it should have a stylized card that says the third result is already installed. And
but also, this isn't the first time Jetpack's gotten in trouble.
No, not the first time.
Remember when they were the only one that would allow you to buy within their plugin premium themes. So Jetpack does stuff. They may ask, but I know for me and the experiences I had while I was on the Make WordPress marketing team, there's a lot of things that happen, that there's other things that are happening, and people who have financial investment in those plugins are really the ones who say what actually happens.
I mean, I think that if we are able to separate, I think a lot of the time Jetpack gets has a bad rep because people are like, oh, it's automatic, and therefore it's like, there's this kind of like aversion to that because of everyone's kind of always expecting automatic to come take over everything. And I think everyone's like hyper sensitive to that, which I don't necessarily think is right, because I think it should definitely be more of a collaborative experience, like, because I know that's how Automatic views its contribution to WordPress, as collaborative, but that is not how it's necessarily viewed from the community. Knowing that, Jetpack should probably take extra steps to avoid that, as opposed to asking what is essentially two people for permission.
Right, because PR and marketing, which Automatic is terrible at, and they've continued to be terrible at.
We're just making the assumption, though, that I'm not saying that this is exactly what we're saying. We're making the assumption that there was some malicious intent here, right? And
so I think there isn't.
I'm
not saying there isn't. There may.
I don't.
It may or may not have been, right? It could just be that the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing, right? What honestly happens in large organizations. It could be that.
I think it's.
I'm not saying it's not.
I honestly do, and I think that there is I don't necessarily think that obliviousness should be an excuse, but I do think it's part of the problem, because people are in their silos and they're doing their thing, and everyone's not checking what everyone else is doing. And that's the case for a lot of plugins and a lot of people. Like, a lot of players in the WordPress ecosystem are not like paying attention or actively being, stewards of the entire community. So I don't just single Jetpack out for that.
Here's where it comes back to, though.
They just know who to ask, and they have the pathway to ask those people. So a regular plugin developer wouldn't be like, hey, plugin team, can we do this? Yes, and have that like kind of slightly back channel conversation, versus a normal regular plugin developer. So there is that, but I don't think that it's malicious, in my opinion.
Okay, so unethical.
And I think that the thing is one of the things that comes back to here is that the plugin review team approves these things and allows these things in the .org repo, which to me is representation of an extension of WordPress, right? So when we let plugins, and it doesn't matter whether it's WooCommerce, which does it a ton, or Jetpack, which does it a ton, like WooCommerce advertising their extensions as admin notifications, Jetpack advertising backups as admin notifications, Monster Insights advertising their premium stuff as admin notifications. All of this
literally everybody.
The dashboard, a horrible experience. And that makes people not just hate the single plugin, because most users don't differentiate. They're like, I installed this WordPress thing. WordPress sucks because there's 700 admin notices advertising 12 different things. I'm sick of the noise. I'm sick of all of this. Like, more and more, that's what I hear from average users is WordPress is frustrating. There's too many notifications. There's too many updates. It's always asking me to do stuff like click here and accept this and dismiss this. Mm-hmm. Like the plugin review team and the repository, both for theme review and plugin review, although here it's clearly plugin review, like ought to have stricter guidelines and not allow plugins that are distributed through .org to provide such a bad experience. And I think hijacking search results is like the final line in a long line of things that shouldn't be allowed.
I think I was just going to say, it's why representation really matters. And in WordPress, we talk a lot about diversity. What we don't talk about is diversity of thought.
The emphasis in the word they talk.
Yeah, the plugin review team is too small. And
what did you say we don't talk about?
Diversity of thought. And so what you have is like this echo chamber, the bro code, people, whatever you want to say, all these podcasts with 30 to 45-year-old white males sitting around agreeing with each other, and the confirmation bias. I'm telling you what my friends are saying. Okay,
as you should.
I know that's not true because Jason has this podcast. I'm on the other one with him, and we're 50-50, and I'm 46. So I'm not in the bro code. Okay, but my point is that when you have people volunteer and they go to make a difference because they know that spending their time in Make WordPress is something that they could do in order to change things, and then they are maliciously or discouraged from offering their opinions or railroaded or roadblocked every time they try to make a change, then you have what we've seen, this exodus of people who get treated as if they are these terrible. I'm really not happy with the adjectives that I've heard people discuss when it comes to Rian Rittville, Carol Olinger, Heather Burns, like they're hysterical, like whatever. My change, I think I did a better job of like complaining.
Hysterical? Did they actually say that?
I've heard people say that to me in person, like, oh, well, they're just too much or whatever. Like I woke up one day and I got an email that said Yoast was in charge of the marketing team I thought I'd been leading for almost 3 years. That was super awesome, right? So then I'm like, what the F? Okay, so there's
you can
like
say fuck on this show. It's okay.
I mean, I don't know, like if it's on FCC or whatever, but seriously,
FCC.
like you spend a lot of money on time and energy fighting for something that you think should be right, building something and everything, and then you get to a certain point where it's just like you're hitting ahead. You're hitting, and I talk to these ladies personally. I know them, and I know what it's like to be doing something, and then the only one who ultimately approves everything is Matt Mullenweg. So whatever you think about that, that's the reality. So if these women aren't going forward in their volunteerism, there is a huge top-down culture issue in Make WordPress.
Totally get it. But I want to talk about your personal situation for a second. Let's dig into what you just said. You woke up one morning, you got an email, right?
Yeah.
Looking at that objectively for just a second, I'm not saying this is the case. Do you think that was done personally toward you as an attack? Do you think that was malicious, or do you think it was an oversight? And I'm asking you honestly. I know I might be asking.
Do I think the CEO of a million dollar? I think that we like to say it's not malicious. I think that I know that Yoast knew that email was coming. I mean, that blog post, you get the email notifications from the update.
Let me ask it a different way. Is there a problem between you and Matt where he
targeted Mullenweg? No.
Then that's
why my handler was Josepha, and Yoast and Josepha both knew for a week, and nobody bothered to tell me or my team. Instead, we read about it on the internet.
Right. So it was handled like shit, right? It was handled.
Oh, totally. And also take something a woman built really well and then just hand it over to a man to lead.
I'm not discounting any of that. I agree
whether or not I was going to stay is not the issue because I built it to leave because I knew I'd have a hysterectomy. But the point is that's what it looks like from a marketing standpoint. And we're talking about the marketing team.
Totally.
Right?
Look, I get it. I understand the optics. I understand how it felt. I
It's not
get
the first time.
all of that. Everything you're explaining is valid. It's correct. I'm not discounting any of it. I'm just trying to explore whether this is malicious intent throughout, because that's sort of the running theme of what I'm hearing here is there's a lot of things happening, and I'm not sure if it's got specific targets, if it's malicious, or if it's just dumb oversight or lack of oversight.
I think it's
right?
asking for forgiveness instead of permission, which, from a standpoint of running an organization that powers 33% of the internet, at best is incompetence. At best.
And that's what I'm getting at. Again, I'm not defending Matt. I'm not defending any of the decisions that were made. I think these are all shitty, right? Everything that happened is shitty, right? And you're right. The optics of all this is crap.
I think what Steve's saying is there's a difference between things that happen that are shitty and things that are malicious.
That's right.
Right. Well, so
and I think that
I want to just say for a second, in Carol's case, and I have not read anything about this other than her blog post, which I take at its face value to be an accurate assessment. She seems like she's not coming from a place of malice, just telling what her experience was. She was actually asked to lead a team for specifically based on the work that she had done for the previous 2 years, and then didn't find out until after the organizing team had been announced that she had been rejected from a position that she had been specifically asked to take on. So that's not Matt's fault, right? Matt had nothing to do with that, likely. I mean, I don't know, but I'm assuming, right? The problem here is a disconnect of the communication across the board. I think blaming this on Matt is just using him as a scapegoat. And I don't think that is actually any way to solve the problem, because the real problem is, and I made a comment like this on Twitter this week, is that, Morton was saying at More10, you can tweet it, was saying that, the problem is there's a lack of this clear path forward, right? But the devs, for every conversation I have with the devs, every conversation I have with the core team, everything that Matt says, everything that they're pushing there, they do have a vision. The problem is that the community is not part of that decision. And so when things get handed down, they feel like they're edicts, as opposed to a decision that the community, who has so much at stake, has participated in this. Incidentally, that specific stuff is why Morton and Rachel Cherry have started the WordPress Governance Project, which literally every single person who works in WordPress and is concerned about this should be a part of, because all that it's doing right now is documenting the situation and what's happening and trying to understand it. And until we have this mapped out, it's only going to be, these little snippets on Twitter, these little pile-ons, until it's like what we were talking about earlier on the pre-show, right? If you don't map out, take your daily temperature and present your daily list of symptoms to your doctor, they're going to be like, you're full of crap. We don't know what you have. You're full of it, right? If we are able to document this process and be like, look, this is a pattern. This is not just a one-time instance or a personality issue with two people or one leader or lead of a group. This is a community-wide, ecosystem-wide issue. And it's not just top-down, it's fused throughout the thing. And that is, I think, more dangerous, because there isn't a quick fix. There isn't a this person is the problem. If you get rid of this person, you get rid of the problem. Getting rid of one person, putting, Matt even removing himself and putting Josepha in as executive director, that's not solving the problem. That doesn't change the culture. And thinking that one person is the problem and therefore one person can be the solution is the problem. Okay.
So we're seeing, results. So the results that we're seeing now of different decisions that are being made for things showing up in the dashboard, stuff showing up as notifications, stuff showing up as top search results for plugins. Is it because of the lack of the oversight, the lack of the governance part of it? Is it
I
that
think so.
the policing
believe
thing
so.
isn't the right we're not doing the right way of going about self-policing our the types of things we're
I
doing?
think that there are a lot of people out there, Carol, Ryan, others, who are super passionate about WordPress. I'm super passionate about WordPress, and I get frustrated when people don't listen to me. And I appreciate them feeling frustrated that people didn't listen to them. I appreciate they did good work. I didn't see most of it. I'm not going to weigh in on it because it's not the part of WordPress I pay a lot of attention to. But at the end of the day, the WordPress community and the governance of the community needs to figure out how to tap into this passionate community, the passionate community members more, to encourage them, promote them, and support them. Because I think that it's easy in the open source world to be very vocal and to be at the same time feel like you're not heard, because it is open source, right? Everybody has a say, but that doesn't mean that everybody gets listened to.
So
There's a disconnect there. And I think that comes back to the governance side of it more than anything.
it sounds like there's also a misalignment of values, right? And so I just did a quick Google search for the WordPress value system and found a section called Etiquette. I've never even looked at these before. I'm going to read you this section, right? So under Etiquette, it says the WordPress open source community cares about diversity. We strive to maintain a welcoming environment where everyone can feel included by keeping communication free of discrimination, incitement of violence, promotion of hate, and unwelcoming behavior.
We're not living up to that.
That's right.
It's true.
And
We're
so,
just not, as a community, we're not living up to our own stated values.
and so we either, so as a community, we either need to revisit this, right? So either start living up to this or change that language.
We value unwelcoming behavior.
Look, a value system isn't right or wrong, right? The value system doesn't say good or bad or right or wrong. It's just the things that we value. And this is written into the values on their website, and the team's not practicing it.
Yeah,
This
it's a
is
cognitive
what-
dissonance.
Because this is what we purport to be. This is what everyone who starts in is like, yeah, you can contribute, you can do this. And then if you get too in, this ceases to be true. And
Right.
this is that disconnect specifically.
And that's why I think that's why this feels so, this feels malicious or unethical, or you pick a word. It feels like an attack because these values are just words on a web page. They don't mean anything because they're not being practiced.
And
so
that's
I think whoever it is on the team that's in charge of this page or these values or wherever these come from needs to revisit this.
I just want to say one quick thing about the plugin guidelines and this. The fact that they're guidelines is part of the problem. These are just like guidelines, like these are suggested ideas. And what ends up happening is literally, and I adore Mika. I think she's an amazing human being. And I also think that Otto is just really smart and does a ton of great work, right? Like, and works really hard. And I do not begrudge them their roles in the slightest. But having two people interpret the guidelines for the entire freaking world of like 34% of the internet is insane. It's insane to expect them to do that. And it's insane to expect two people to be able to enforce and interpret all of those guidelines. It's too much for them. Like, it's just too much. It's not inclusive by virtue of the fact that it's two people. So these should not necessarily be guidelines, right? Maybe we should have some actual rules that are like, hey, this is a rule, and if you violate this rule, these are the consequences.
I mean, like, we have the code of conduct, but what happens? Like, there's a lot of like suggestions with our ethics and everything like that, whatever you want to call it, our values, our ethics. But when something happens, like with Carol, where she was suggested to do such and such, who does she appeal to?
Right.
Because and it's not all Matt, but what I'm saying is a lot of the people who work on the community team work for Automatic. So whoever's in charge of that, it doesn't matter. The point is there is a culture problem in the Make WordPress organization, which filters out to WordCamps and meetups, and it affects all these areas of our lives. So I don't know. I don't know what the solution is, but I know that it needs to be discussed without framing the people who are whistleblowers, lack of a better term, a term that's used in the real world, without framing them as crazy, insane, hysterical, overzealous, or whatever negative words have been used to describe these people who are done, just totally done by being constantly shut down.
I mean, shit, I've had all those words used to describe me this morning.
That marriage counselor next week, Steve.
I feel that way too. And you look at like I was going to tweet Carl Hancock from Gravity Forms put on Twitter this morning, where he's like, "I'm being accused of personally attacking Yoast in this case. I'm just done. Like I'm sick of it." And Carl didn't. Like he's the same way I am with the track ticket, trying to be constructive, talking about the code and the actual decisions being made, not talking about the individuals. I didn't have a problem with George. I had a problem with something Jetpack did, right? Like if George felt like I personally attacked him. I'm like, I'm not, I swear.
And I think that's really hard.
I like all these people.
Yeah.
But it's such a personalized community that sometimes it's messy.
That's what happens when two people or one person is in charge of a thing. And then someone's like, there's a
Totally
problem with that thing. And they're going to be like, take it personally because it's their thing. That's just how it's going to be.
Yeah, it's why I keep pointing back to better governance, plugin review.
Check that out.
I'm not wearing a watch, but I am looking
I just
at my
want
wrist.
you to know, it's over here in at least in my part of California. So I want to say thank you very much to all of you guys for hanging out. Really appreciate it. This stuff's hard. I know this is not going to be the last time we talk about this. This is definitely not going to be the last time we talk about this. But I will tell you folks, the folks that come to this show and they want to know like what's our favorite plugins, what's all the cool stuff that's going on, all those things, those are going to happen. But we also have tons of archives of this stuff as well. Go over to our website at WPwatercooler.com. You can find all that stuff that's over there. And if you want to be on the show, you want to be here and you want to actually talk to us, WPwatercooler.com/subscribe. That page on there has a whole bunch of ways of being able to get a hold of us and be able to get added into that mix of what's going on here in WP Watercooler land. Talk to y'all later. You have a good one.